life has this sort of board game aspect to it. And I think that it's easy to mistake money as the purpose of the game. But these are just structures like the rules of the board game that just guide us to other things.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. My name's Rick Nusky, and on today's call I have a very special guest, and her name is Jacqueline Claire. How are you, Jacqueline?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Yes, absolutely, my pleasure. Now, Jacqueline and I, who for everybody who's on the show, we were talking about how to live a cohesive life, and we're going to be talking in depth about that with Jacqueline. But before we do, I'd love to get you to share a little bit about your lifestyle, your background with the My Future Business audience.
Sure thing. So I live in this cool little town called New Braunfels, Texas. It's
Mm.
right between both Austin and San Antonio, and it's this little German town that feels like very small town in a good way, just like friendly and historic architecture. And, everyone sort of keeps their word, and it's on the river and it's very beautiful, but we're very close to these
Yep.
very big cities. And I am an artist, so my where I live is also my workspace and my art studio where I paint. And I grew up more or less in this area in Central Texas, and I come from a lot of creators and artists of different mediums, and I've sort of joked that if any if any of the younger generation, like my cousins and I, if any of us like became like teachers or doctors or lawyers, like we would be the black sheep of the family. Um, because everyone's, sort of, I don't know, I guess has both that mixture of exposure that it's possible to do something creative, and then also that sort of genetic makeup that makes you want to do something
Hmm.
creative.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I was also raised with a pretty strong spiritual foundation in the Baha'i faith, which is very global mindset. It's a really good way to raise a child, I think. So that also influences a lot of how I live and my work.
Do you find that the work that you do with people changes their perspective of how they can live a more cohesive life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that to some degree, again, it's that, being exposed, like just knowing that something is possible in and of itself tends to expand people's capacity and impression. So I think in some ways, just like seeing some of the ways that I live my life affects other people, and then with the actual content that I walk people through, either with my art or my live storytelling shows, the purpose of it all is sort of to help people connect in their own hearts and minds. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not there trying to put something on them, but rather help us touch something that is within our own spirits or hearts and
Yep.
minds, that sort of roots us in meaning and purpose. And then from there, our capacity to be more present, our capacity to like see what is really meaningful in our own lives really is increased.
It seems to me like in a lot of society, we seem to be chasing this idea that money is our purpose. What's your take on money and how it affects our ability to have this more spiritual, purposeful life?
Oh, wow. That is such a great question. I think that everything in this material life is sort of it's sort of like we're playing this game of Monopoly or something. Like
Mm.
it's sort of like life has this sort of board game aspect to it, that like, yes, you do need financial means to be able to live a certain kind of like safe life and have shelter and all this stuff, and you also need to have food and all of these very material things. And I think that it's easy to mistake money or material comforts or whatever as the purpose of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But these are just structures, like the rules of the board game, that just guide us to other things. Like they have a deeper purpose than their surface level. And I guess a better analogy might be like a video game that's actually teaching you some very valuable skills.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start thinking that the video game itself is reality, you are very lost, right?
Yes.
Like if
Yes.
somebody believes that their virtual reality is true, there's a problem. And I think most of us are we're so immersed in our need to, like our needs and our wants and all that stuff, that we mistake those for being the real purpose, and they're really not. So like I don't think money is a bad thing. I think obviously money can help us expand what it is we're doing. It can help us reach more people. It can help us help other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that if that starts to overtake your overall purpose, then you're like the person sitting in their living room that desperately needs to be cleaned up. And
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
thinking that the video game is your real life.
I definitely think there is, I guess, an awakening of the consciousness, isn't there, with
Yes.
globally with this sort of work, because
Yes.
in the past it used to be far less mainstream than what it is now, but nowadays it seemed to be, up and at the front, because people are starting to recognise the power in this type of work. Now, I'd love to you, Jacqueline, if you could talk a little bit about the process of storytelling. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it, I guess you could say that it started as a way just for me to, I wanted to help people feel comfortable talking about and engaging with my visual art. So I'm specifically talking about like painting exhibits and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that, art can be sort of like a coffee shop 10 or 15 years ago, where like people felt like sort of intimidated and they didn't really know, like, well, what exactly is a latte or espresso, like, but you don't want to be the uncool person who doesn't know. And so people sort of have that response to art sometimes, that they don't like get it, or and they feel like they need to be sophisticated to talk about it or understand it. And
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to remove those barriers and just create invitations for people to be able to look at and talk about the work and engage with it in a way that actually meant something to them and connected with them.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief in, spiritual realms and my connection to that sort of thing, and we're more than just our physical bodies, that there's something more meaningful going on in our day-to-day choices and lives than just, paying the bills, that we're spiritual in essence,
Yep.
having this material experience. So that's really what drives my work, and that's really what I try to connect with and when I paint. So I started just like sharing some of these concepts with my exhibits. And I had one series in particular that was 7 paintings, and I correlated it with this mystical book called The Seven Valleys. And so I invited people to an art show that was also this storytelling experience, and I was going to walk them through the 7 valleys, and we used the artwork as a way to just explore it at a deeper level. So I would share some quotes or concepts and then ask the guests, like, well, which painting, given these ideas, would you correlate with this concept or with this valley? And it became extremely vibrant. And from these people who might have been intimidated and shy at first,
Mm-hmm.
then the most profound, beautiful, sometimes funny things were coming out of people's mouths about their own life, or about these spiritual principles, or about the art. And I just found that it was really hitting a chord to, connect something very tangible like the visual art with these spiritual principles, and sort of create a space where people could share rather than me just like talking at them.
Yes. Now
Right.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, there's a couple of things I'd love to cover off with you, Jacqueline, and one is going into a little bit more about the mystical Baha'i teachings. Could you share a little bit
Uh-huh.
about that particular background of your life?
Absolutely. Well, sometimes if any of your listeners know about the Baha'i faith, it can come across as exceptionally practical and like that it just makes a whole lot of sense,
Hmm.
like the
Hmm.
basic Baha'i beliefs. It's about the oneness of humankind, and Baha'is believe that there's this loving creator God, but we just call this, you know, creator source all these different names in different cultures and traditions, but we're
Hmm.
all talking about the same thing. And a lot of things that for people make a lot of sense, that men and women are equal and these kind of wild ideas. Um, but there is this other element to the Baha'i faith that is very mystical. And, it is essentially kind of what we've been talking about with the video game idea that we are all experiencing life on this, planet, that we are born into this physical world. And, there are, we are supposed to work and we're supposed to be of service and all these practical things.
Hmm.
But really the purpose of our lives is the refinement of our characters and our soul. And our soul is what's real and what is eternal, and that our bodies will eventually perish, but what we've made of our souls will last. So that's sort of a nutshell. And then the one particular source that I use for the show Awaken to Your Life as a Spiritual Journey is called The Seven Valleys, and it's very poetic. It's written in the style of Sufi mystical poetry, and it was written in the mid 1800s by Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith.
Hmm.
And he's writing to someone who is familiar with Sufi philosophy, and he's answering a very specific question. Someone asked for like a better understanding of this existent concept of these seven valleys, and like, what does this mean? It's symbolic for the different stages of spiritual growth that we go through in this life. And so Baha'u'llah is explaining these seven valleys. So it's like it's built on an existent tradition,
Hmm.
but it's sort of updated and clarified, and it's extremely visual and poetic.
What is I guess, the first couple of things that you say to somebody who's new to this experience?
So it's different if I'm perhaps working on someone one-on-one, but when people come to my shows, I actually have a little icebreaker. And it sounds so sort of pedestrian, but it really seems to work. It works for me and for them. It kind of like, I think, warms me up and it warms them up as well. So when people come to the show, they are welcomed and greeted, which is also unique. Sometimes art shows can feel very cold and unfriendly,
Hmm.
and I really wanted to make it feel different. So even if they've never met me before, a friend brought them along. So I greet them, I'm Jacqueline, I'm the artist, welcome. And I ask them if they want to participate in this icebreaker. And what it is, it's this game using quotes from our source material from the
Hmm.
Seven Valleys. But the goal is for them to mingle and find the person that has the other half of the quote. And the purpose of this is twofold. One, it starts to acquaint them with the text that we're going to be using.
Hmm.
But more so, I wanted to even the social playing field. Like if people are eventually going to feel comfortable sharing some of their thoughts about art and spirituality. I mean, what like fringy things are we talking about? They need to feel like they are important and they have a space here, and that they feel like it's friendly and it's welcoming and stuff. So I wanted a reason for people to talk to people they didn't know and give them a sense of purpose, which is to put the quotes together.
Hmm.
So once they find their other half and they have a complete quote now, and they're like paired with random people, but they're like a team,
Yep.
then they are encouraged to pick out which of the 7 paintings in the series they feel goes with the quote. And then we share it later on. So yeah, then you have these people who just met sometimes looking at the artwork together and discussing like what's going to be their piece and why. And it truly seems to break the ice and really get people feeling at home and warmed up.
Yeah, I can see how this would bring people together because I've been looking through your wonderful website and you have some amazing artwork there. It's not just average
Thank
artwork.
you.
This is amazing artwork, and for everybody who's on the show, we're going to be sharing the details back to Jacqueline's website shortly. Now, I think an important aspect to this conversation today, Jacqueline, is to understand your personal mindset and when you go about creating this amazing art and taking people through this process. I'd love for you to share with us what your typical day looks like.
Oh, sure. Well, when I paint, I prefer to have the whole day to do it. I sort of have my
Hmm.
painting days and then my admin and networking days and my show days.
The
Um,
boring stuff.
which I like actually.
The
It's
admin.
I actually do like for me, I know people who like paint as a hobby or they find it very relaxing and
Hmm.
stuff. And for me, it actually really requires discipline. I have to, because for me, it's a lot easier to do something, like, it's this silly example, but, you put a post on, social media
Hmm.
and instantly the world is acknowledging that you exist and it's like giving you feedback and stuff like that. And it's very easy to get sucked into those just like immediate gratification things. And for
Hmm.
me, art is very different. It's very much a process and it's can be very slow. So I have to like commit to do what is meaningful. I have to put the big rocks in first,
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah, so I like to have the whole day. And again, that's just to give me a sense of spaciousness with my work
Hmm.
and not have like, you know, emails or errands that have to be done or anything like that. And I do have a book that I love by an artist. It's called The Art Spirit by Robert Henry. It was like the turn of the century, early 1900s.
Hmm.
And I'll just like read like a sentence or two just to remind me of the importance of the work that I'm doing and like approaching the process of painting with respect. And then I start with warm-ups. It's sort of like a musician doing scales. I usually do it like on big rolls of butcher paper, sometimes on canvases, but I just like to loosen up and I'll just do like quick studies of figures or what have you. I'll use like photography books and stuff to warm
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
And then I'm usually working on anywhere from 2 to 4 paintings at a time. I work in a lot of layers and I use acrylic, so the layers have to dry. And, I like to let each phase of the painting sort of influence the next step that I take. So it's very organic and it's very innovative. I don't usually sketch out my work and pre-plan what I'm doing. I take one step and I analyze how is this working? What does it need? And then I do something based on that and work in that fashion.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I love this idea of this creative process, getting in flow, if you like. Do you find that you're absolutely have the blinkers on once you get into that zone?
Yeah, I can definitely do it for like hours on end. Uh, but I do have to take breaks.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
take little mini breaks and take a walk and whatever. And then it's like, okay, let's get back into it. But yeah, for me, it's much more of like the mule, just like lumbering through than like some sort of like woo-woo transcendent experience when I'm painting, actually.
Now, when people want to learn more about the process that you can take them on to, open their spiritual mindsets and live that more cohesive life, where are they going to go?
So currently there are my live shows and there's my website. I do have Jacqueline Claire Art and all manner of social media platforms, also Jacqueline Claire Art. I have a few things in the works for online interaction with
Mm-hmm.
both the art and the spiritual concepts. So in the works are some online courses and a online community to be able to go through some of these concepts together, and a podcast that's on its way. Uh, yeah, so so again, if people can follow on Facebook or Instagram, Jacqueline Claire Art, and they will know when these things are available. But currently I just work privately with people in my studio. I do have a promo code for your listeners. So it's myfuturebusiness 10 on Jacqueline Claire Art, and they can use that on fine art prints and originals.
Thank you so very much for sharing what you've shared with us today, and everybody who's on the call. For me, this has been wonderful. I'm actually looking through Jacqueline's artwork, at least what is available online, and it is fantastic. So if you want to get your hands on it, you will find the links below this post. No matter where you are, you will find a link back to Jacqueline somehow. Jacqueline, thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business show today.
Oh, my pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.